I'll try to speak slowly. I'm sorry, I do not speak Bahasa. We have Eli, we have Adnan. And we have Mazdi down here. Basically is Mr. KPI. Which is important. It's important because it's a critical part of the performance management system. We're part of OSR, and OSR has been working with SPAN for the last 4 months, putting this together. This is really your opportunity to ask questions and to have interaction. We've done this 2 times already, 1 day or a 2-day session with all of the HODs and a lot of the executives. And then we had 2 weeks ago, 1-day session like we're having today with your colleagues. Your colleagues had a lot of questions, a lot of debate, which is very good, okay? Don't worry about the camera in the back. If there's anyone talking and anything controversial, we'll cut that out, all right? Because it's important that you express, that you're able to say what you think. And this is important because it comes to your job and your job performance. And ultimately, the objective of this is for you to get to a level at SPAN where we have what's called pay for performance, which means that the bonus will be attached to or tied to somewhat to your overall job performance. So far, my English okay? Yeah. I watch your eyes. If you don't understand, I know you don't understand. So basically, why are we here today? Really what we're here today to do is not only to explain the system for you, but also that you get to question, you get to feel comfortable with what's going to be happening. 1 day to do this in. We'll have 2 more sessions after this, so we'll have covered basically over 50% of you. And then you'll continue it through SPAN all of itself. What has happened at SPAN is very typical of many, many organizations we work with. And that is that you've had a job performance review system that has been very inconsistent. Things don't link together. Right? For example, non-executives, you were judged on behavior, but the executives were not. And the pay, sometimes no one could explain why things happen the way they happen. So what this performance management system is about is really everyone being treated in the same way, in a transparent way. So you can now not say it's because of favoritism or because some other factor that somebody got a promotion or somebody got a specific level in their performance, right? So as a consequence of that, what we're going to do is really spend the morning talking about what is the system, how does it work, how can you be impacted by it, and then this afternoon we're going to give you some elements with regard to negotiation, because you're ultimately going to have to sit down with your boss and negotiate, right? And talk about what your performance was like, what your performance should be, etc. And since your bosses have already had this program, it's only fair that you also get the same ideas, right? Because they've been taught how to negotiate, you should be taught how to negotiate. So that's what we're going to do this afternoon. And we do that through what we call role plays. And we'll have 3 role plays today. So far, so good? Okay. All right. So the background. This is a very complicated chart. That's why we break it down. Basically, the idea is that in order to get to pay for performance and ultimately to selection and development of people, you basically have to have a structure in place that will allow for a transparent, for a clear, and systematic way of evaluating people. And so what we start off with is really from the very top of the organization. What is SPAN to do? What is your job as SPAN? And then we bring it down to, given what SPAN has to do and the Commission's requirements for SPAN, you then have to develop certain jobs. And those jobs then have to be evaluated. And so what you need is you need job descriptions and evaluations. You need the salary scales that fit that job description. And then basically, these will feed into the performance review. And I'll show you how that's done later. But in order for that to work, though, a job performance review, so this is sort of like what we call the backbone, the central part of a performance review system, performance management system, right? So the organization has to have a strategy and a purpose. You have to have jobs, organizational structure. You have to have jobs. Those jobs have to have a salary attached to them, and they have to be the requirements for a job performance review. On top of that, though, you have different elements. First of all, you have what we call the what of your job. Those are the KPIs, key performance indicators, the KPIs that you get. So basically, there's a whole new way, or the right way, let's put it that way, the right way to look at key performance indicators. I know that you had a year ago, or almost 2 years ago now, a KPI type system put in place, but it's not very helpful. It's not what we need. And therefore, you have to go back into the system and start again. And that's the frustration, is that the what has to be set right. But it's not only what you do, it's also how you do it. What are the behaviors that you have, that you display in your organization that will allow you to achieve your results? So any good performance management system has a balance between the what and the how. And you look at both of them on top of what we've looked at, which is the central core, right? The core, the backbone of your organization. So these three things have to come together. You have to have the structure in place, you have to have the what, and you have to have the how. Once you have that, you have a job performance system. And it's established across all levels in the organization. Non-executive, executives, and HODs. And we'll show that to you how this is done today. So basically, the majority of today is going to be talking about KPIs, and it's going to be talking about leadership competencies. Leadership competencies, this word here, actually what it describes is behavior. They're very specific behaviors. So that's really the core elements. You are doing this internally, the KPIs, and we basically worked on this. This is what OSR did, and OSR also helped in here in terms of leveling out and making sure that the span salaries, the bands that you are in, correspond to what the market has. And it's not easy because you are a regulator, right? You are a government entity. So we can't really take the free market, like in the water, as a reference. We actually have to take other government regulatory, like NCMC or something like that, to compare. So this job is not an easy job to do, but it's been done, and your commission is now going to be told or asked for permission to implement it next month. So there are going to be some salary adjustments depending on the level, depending on what you're doing, etc. Not everyone, but I would expect most people will. Right? So that basically this piece makes sense now. It's set. So now we can move forward with KPIs and with behaviors. Let me first talk about KPIs a little bit. Basically, one of the things is that it's covering the what of the job. So what are you expected to do? What have you done? What should you be doing, etc. within your job? Now, there's a big misunderstanding about KPIs. KPIs is not your job description. Your job description is the job you're supposed to be doing. Okay. But if everyone just does their job, the organization doesn't move forward. It doesn't progress. Right? And therefore, what the KPI should be doing is looking not only at a small element of what you're supposed to be doing, but also what could you be doing more. And that's what KPIs in the future are going to be looking at more than right now. So just because you do your job, that's not going to help ultimately move span forward. The way this goes, and the way they set this up, is basically the commission establishes KPIs. Your ministry establishes KPIs. They say, span, you must achieve these targets. So that's established at the very beginning, at the very top. And And that sets the direction for, okay, now that we have these KPIs from the ministry, now we have a commission saying you must do this, what do we have to do? Add SPAN. And SPAN then basically sat down in January and had a whole day internal session of what is our strategy given what we've been given. Now there's some difficulties in this. First of all, the ministry has not given the KPIs for this year. They had it from last year, but that might change. There were about 22 KPIs, 22 KPIs from the ministry. That's a lot of KPIs, right? But as a result of the commission also, now that's changed because the government changes, but the commission was very, very aggressive in the last year, asking for SPAN to move forward in certain directions. And so we've had very clear indication of direction. And that led the SPAN leaders to set up the strategies, which you've seen in the town hall meeting. You were in the town hall meeting 2 weeks ago? Did you have town hall? Yes. Yes. Okay. And did Dr. explain to you the strategy? No? Well, you see it here. If you missed it, I have it. And I'll show it to you. Okay? It's coming up. Okay? From there then, what happens? Sorry. What happens is that we take the strategy then, and we have to give it down to the direction of the HODs. So each HOD takes the strategy, takes the KPIs from the ministry, and looks at what do we have to do in our division. And then from the division level, or in your case, it's now called departments, right? You have department at the top. So from the department level, then you actually then go into what you call divisions. But normally companies call these divisions and these departments. And basically there, you have to take what the direction is here and bring it down to that level. And finally, once your bosses know what they're supposed to be doing, and they as an organization are supposed to be doing, you can bring it down to the individual KPI. So your KPIs should ultimately come all the way down here. It should come from here, from here, from here, from here. That's the way you link KPIs to strategy. And what happens is, if everything works out and your KPIs are fulfilled, then basically we have it in reverse. If your tasks are completed, your KPIs are done, you get 100% scoring, and basically everyone in your department does the same. Everyone then for the department achieves its objectives. If all departments achieve their objectives, then all of the divisions will achieve their objectives and their goals, and therefore the strategy will be fulfilled and the ministry will be very happy. So it's what we call the flywheel. It basically is, it moves down and then back up. Down, back up, every year. Down and back up. This is important because right now, according to the ministry, so these people up here, this past year you achieved 87% of your target. 87%. That is not a good score. That is not a good score. You should be achieving at least 100%. At least. Now, you're doing much better because the year before that you achieved 70, 90%. So you've almost jumped 10%, but you're still not where you need to be. You're still not where you need to be. And so therefore, we need to not only look at what the ministry wants, but also how can we get strategies that will push the organization to not only 100%, but 110%, 120%. If you want to become the water authority in Southeast Asia and around the world that everyone looks up to, you have to hit 120%, at least. And the thing is that you can do it. You can absolutely do it if you get everything going in the right direction. This is the strategy, the 8 strategies that your Dato is out and all of his direct reports worked on in January. And there are 8 strategies. So there's a continuous supply, right? Which means that a continuous supply of water, meaning that there's a minimum reserve margin, there has to be the network that is interconnected, there has to be a sufficient storage of water, and there has to be alternative supplies if some sort of water stops being supplied. Yeah? In order to do that, you also need to do what's called resource management, which is how do you control pollution, how do you make sure that the water is properly set up and reclaimed and reused, right? So that we basically get the demand management. Demand management means the recyclable water. The amount of recyclable water that Malaysia has is not acceptable today. It's 34% of water is not recyclable, is not reusable. Right? And as a consequence of that, that number, the RNW, non-renewable water, must come down. And the question is, what can SPAN do? Because you don't control it directly, right? What can SPAN do to help the other organizations bring down that number? So these three really are about water and about how do we help get better at running water. Then the next one is customer centricity, or we'll call customer-centric. SPAN is in a difficult position because you have so many water companies, sewer companies, ministry, water people, customers like us. Right? You know, I live in Bangsa, so water's on, water's off, what's happening? Do we fill our bathtub with water or not? You know, these things happen, right? So you have many stakeholders. And you have to now start talking more to the public, engaging with the public. As a very good example of that is what your health ministry is doing with coronavirus. Malaysia is being displayed as an excellent example worldwide in open communication and in updating everyone about what is happening with coronavirus. They know the data, they give the data, they know what to do. And so therefore, there's very, very little panic going on in Malaysia. So Malaysia is actually, you know, I listen to press around the world, particularly US, because that's where I'm from. They always talk about Malaysia. Malaysia boleh. On coronavirus. Right? Which is like, wow, great. Yeah? Better than Singapore, better than Hong Kong. Right? So if that can happen for them, it can happen here too. You can also, you, SPAN, have water in that same dialogue. So there's this idea of public service, this idea of how do you make everyone talk to each other and not just complain and fight. Then there's this down here, world-class workforce. This is basically a talent management program that should be instituted sometime this year. Training and development, which is what we're doing today, etc. Right? Scholarships, performance reward system. So this is where this whole performance management system sits. Then we have digital transformation. Every organization is going through it. There's the big data, it's IoT, it's all the things that are happening. And you have Dr. Supri's department or division that's working on these elements, right? All new to you. But this is coming up and should be within the next 3 or 4 years. Very much different than what you're doing today. And then effective enforcement, basically the acts, the guidelines, this is the legal part of it, right? As well as how do we improve our processes internally. And last but not least, strategic communication, in terms of educating the public, the social media, that all of these elements can actually fit together. So these are the 8 strategies. They make sense? They're not happening now, but they have to happen in the future. So what are we going to do to get our KPIs and our behaviors in line with this strategy? Because otherwise, this strategy just sits here and nothing happens. And year after year, we say, oh, we have a strategy. It's a 2025 strategy. Like you had the plan was 2020, right? It didn't happen. It didn't happen. And the only way it can happen is through you. And the only way you can do it is if you all work together and you all know what to do and how to do it. That's what performance management system is all about. It's bringing clarity, transparency, simplicity to understand who does what, why are you doing what you're doing, and how does that relate to strategies. Okay? So basically what we're saying is that up here, this is already done. strategies are set. So what does that mean then down here for you? How do you bring this down to your level and make it understandable? All right. That's the idea. So let me then move to the behavior side. And they're called leadership competencies. But don't, that's a big word. Because a lot of people say, oh, I lead no one, and what is this? It basically is behaviors, right? And what it is that observed behaviors, people observe others. And there are certain people who are much more productive and do a much better job than others. And the question always was, why are they more productive? And they display certain behaviors. And these are what's called leadership competencies. So they generate, these behaviors have a big impact on the quality of the work that is done. And the question always is, what are those behaviors? What can we do in our behavior that allows us to do a better job? And the nice thing is that it not only is about, once you have them, you can not only look at performance management, you can also tie it to compensation, which is a paid for performance. You can look at it in recruitment and selection. When you go and introduce somebody, you're now looking at the set of behaviors that they may or may not have. And training and development. That you will start seeing when we do a training session to the future, that basically we're looking for a set of behaviors, the consistency of behaviors. Right? Most important is that these behaviors have to come in through the job performance review. And I don't know if you've been through that with your boss, and you're sitting in the chair, but they often look like this, right? They often look like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Why am I being treated this way? I never said that, I never did that, et cetera, right? The idea here, therefore, is not to have this situation set up. We're not looking to punish, we're actually looking to build. We're looking to generate positive. And how do you do that? How do you do that with behavior? So what we did is we basically spent November looking at what are the behaviors that make sense for SPAN, that's important for SPAN, that will help SPAN move forward. Okay? And we ended up with about 20 behaviors that could or could not work for you. We benchmarked global practices in England for off-walk, it's called. We looked at Singapore water, we looked at Canada, we looked at many, many different organizations that are in your market, that are in your space. And we got about 30 to 40 of those. We then brought them down to about 15 to 20. We had a half-day workshop with the HODs, the steering committee, as well as part of some of your executives and some of the younger people in the organization. So it's not just adult bosses, we also have people from within your ranks. And we basically came up with 7 competencies. We had another workshop that went even deeper, and we basically then really came up with the final 7. So we've spent a lot of time starting from here and bringing it down. And then from there, we basically got the final okay last month, about a month ago. And that's the basis upon which we're now going to look at what are these behaviors. So there's 7 behaviors, as I said. 3 of them we count as what we call foundational. These behaviors impact on how everyone does their job. But they're not going to move the organization forward. Everyone must have it, right? So it's like having a platform. It's having a strong base. Right? And the strong base is made up of 3. The first one is honesty. You have to be honest. That's almost like self-evident, right? If you're not honest, then you shouldn't be employed by SPAN. Honesty was also something that's important. And it's important because you have so many stakeholders. And bribery and dishonesty and many, many different ways of being impacted and influenced. So basically, honesty is important. The next one is discipline. And by discipline, meaning you are a regulator. SPAN regulates. So therefore, you need to know what are the regulations, what are the rules, how do you apply those rules, right? What are the policies? What are the things that, and we have to act accordingly. We cannot just do what we want to do. We have to follow policies. And that's what we call discipline. And the last one is called accountable. And accountable basically means that you are taking responsibility. You have a job to do. You take it seriously. You deliver on time. You know, you don't blame others. You take responsibility. That's accountability. So those are the three, right? And basically, these three allow you to do your job. But that's not enough. We need to now display other behaviors that we call strategic behaviors. These are the behaviors that are going to change the way SPAN is run. These are the things that if everyone displays these behaviors, the culture of SPAN will change. And the four of them is, the first one is called proactive. Proactive basically means you just don't see a problem, you actually think about it. And you come up with ideas of how to solve that problem. And you share those ideas. That's called proactive. So, just going to your boss and say, boss, I have a problem, that should, in this case, should not be good enough. It's, boss, I have a problem, but here's a possible solution. That's being proactive. Being proactive means I want to engage, I think of things. The next one is called customer driven, and this is the idea of you really have to understand and anticipate, look forward to what are the customers, what is in the best interest of our customers. And the customers sometimes are water companies, but most often they are actually us. Malaysians, people who live in Malaysia who use water, right? So everyone. So 33 million customers, right? And here it's to look at, well, what is in the interest of the customer? How can we help support our customers better? How can we help support ourselves better? The next one is called strategic, and that's basically, remember the 8 strategies? So it's like, how can your job impact those 8 strategies? Strategic is, I have an understanding of where we're trying to go, and I'm doing everything I can to help go there. So it's not just my job today, what I do today, it's also how can I move forward? And the last one is called studious, and that basically is you're keen to learn. You basically want to get better, you want to do more, you want to learn more. And nowadays, the learning is all shifting, right? YouTube, online learning, all these different elements. And the thing about water is 2 things. One is, water is the most strategically important asset any country has. It is going to be, in the next 20, 30 years, the most vital element. It's not palm oil, it's not rubber, it's water. Water is it. So therefore, you have an incredibly important job as SPAN and as people in SPAN. Because actually Malaysia has some great water. It's a critical resource, but you have to treat it right. You have to bring down the pollution. You have to be able to help get the NRW down. Because it's going to be critical in the next 30 years. Whether or not we as human beings survive, it depends on water. So that's the number 1 element in all of this. And as a consequence of that, there is a need to understand what is happening in water. You should be involved in that. The other element is that with the IoT, the Internet of Things, there are so many changes that are coming. What we measure, how we measure it, what's happening, all of our jobs are going to be shifting in the next 5 to 10 years. So you have to anticipate. You have to think about, what can we learn from this? What are the things that are happening with regard to the Internet of Things and water? How is that going to change? And all of our jobs are going to be impacted. But you are at least in a nice area in that you're sitting in water. And water is important, and so therefore you're going to have a job. It's just one job. So don't worry about your job going away. Your job's going to grow. Right? So if anything, it's this idea of understanding what you're doing, how you're interacting, what is your role, and how can you grow that role. So those are the 7, right? 7, honesty, discipline, accountable. This basically means that you're doing your job properly, with integrity, ethically. And these 4 is really about thinking, about being focused on your customers, about looking beyond just today, but to the future, and understanding and getting excited about learning more and doing more. So that's fine, but how do you do this? How do you observe these behaviors? What's important? How do we implement this at work? This is the key. So how is it done? It's basically as follows. There are 3 levels in the organization. There is the non-executives, there's the executives, and what's called HODs. The thing is that we expect the non-executives, we call key characteristics, to basically, they themselves. If you're a non-executive, you just care for yourself. What are your behaviors? Care for your behaviors. And that's what we call self-leadership. That's a level 1. Right? Within the non-executives, you also have the talent pool and people who are ready for promotion, or getting ready for promotion. So therefore, we can expect them to have what's called a level 2, the emergent characteristic. They don't have to have all of them, but they have to start showing some of those behaviors. Because what happens is that if you're an executive and you have people working for you, you not only have to show self-leadership, right, because it's expected, but you also have to show how you help others, how you lead others in these behaviors. So not only do you have to show it yourself, you also have to take your people, if you're supervising your people, and work with them together so they can be. So there actually is a higher level. There's more expected of these people than of these people. Because it's not only that they have to do themselves, they also have to help others do it. And then the final level, which is the advanced level, HOD, which is called level 3, they not only have to self-lead, they not only have to lead their subordinates, they also have to help run the entire business. Run the span. So as an HOD, it's no longer just, this is my domain, this is my department, this is my division. I actually have to look across, I have to go outside the company. I have to talk to water companies, I have to talk to sewer companies, I have to talk to the ministry, I have to explain, etc. So there are 3 levels of behavior. Same behavior, but at 3 different levels. So for example, here's one. Remember studious, which is competency number 7, the last one. So basically, level 1, which is self-leadership, this is the definition of this behavior at that level. And it basically says, non-executives apply and continuously build their own knowledge and their own capabilities. So you're interested and you're learning. That's what it means. At level 2, same behavior. Now it is span executives continuously build their own competencies, yes, that we already saw, but they actively engage with each subordinate to build their individual set of competencies. So your boss is as interested in you learning as you are learning yourself. And they have to show that. They have to show that. That's what we call observable behavior. And last, level 3, right, the HODs are continuous learners. They basically already are always learning, and that they understand what needs to happen within SPAN in terms of learning and development for everyone. Because they also are outside the company, inside the company, they're looking at very different levels. So you see the same behavior, 3 different levels expected. So your bosses are expected to show more than you are. And for that matter, the HODs have an even higher level to fulfill. But it's all the same behavior, which is learning. Learning good. Does this make sense? So now, everyone in the organization is interested in learning. Learning more, knowing more. Curious about what's happening in water. It doesn't mean that tomorrow you're going to have to become a PhD or a doctorate in water, right? But basically know and be interested in expanding your horizon. As well as if you're interested in becoming, I don't know, programmer or something else that would help SPAN move forward, start that, do that. That's encouraged because you're learning. You're learning. That's the main thing. So here is one behavior broken down into each level. Today, we're going to focus on this one, self-leadership for all 7. But know that your bosses are also being evaluated on that behavior. And know that your boss's boss is also being evaluated on that behavior at a higher level, more expected, right? Because they are expected to have that behavior. If they don't, we're in big trouble. If they don't. If we have an HOD who is not interested in learning, we're in trouble. And that HOD is in trouble. Because they actually have an impact on the organization. Now, we're not there yet, okay? Because this is all new. So you're going to turn around and say, my boss has never learned anything. My boss has done this, my boss has done that. Yeah, okay. But moving forward, they're expected to show this. And what happens in an organization where everyone is running with these 7 behaviors, is actually doing these behaviors, you will see SPAN change. SPAN will change. And it will change for the better, not for the worse, for the better. That's the amazing part about leadership competencies. If we are all looking at these key behaviors and are basically documenting them, and bringing them up and talking about them in the job performance reviews, these will have an impact. And you will see it in SPAN. You will physically see it. We've done this before. In organizations that do it well, the whole place changes. And when I go into SPAN, at the head office in Putrajaya, it's a very quiet place right now. A few people move here and there. Everyone does their little job, but I can guarantee you, if you do this, within about a year, year and a half, there will be a buzz. A buzz is, there's a noise. A positive noise. People are talking. People are moving around, getting excited about things. It doesn't sound like SPAN. No, SPAN's not that, you know. SPAN's very quiet, people do their jobs, and people are very polite, you know. There's all kinds of sometimes, but you see in organizations that have these types of behaviors where everyone is acting, that you start seeing a big change. You hear it as well as see it. You hear it, physically hear it. And that's when we know, when we go back into an organization, when I go back to SPAN in a year and a half time, and I hear a noise, there's positive noise, you guys have made it. Right? It's not easy, it's not always 100%, there are people still fighting, people disagreeing, it's okay. The thing is that you're communicating. And you're communicating, you're learning, you're being customer focused, you're trying to come up with ideas, you're thinking about the strategy, things are happening. People wake up when they're in an organization that runs on these types. I know it's hard to believe because you haven't had it yet, right? So we're talking about a world that you've never seen, or may have seen, but not in SPAN. But this world exists. And it's up to you to create it. That's what this is about. It's up to you to create it. So how do we make sure that we're doing this? How do we make sure we're doing this? And that's basically how do we bring it into practice. So what happens is, here are the 7 behaviors, right? So the first one is honesty. So remember, this is the expected behavior description. So SPAN non-executives are honest, act in an ethical manner, and prioritize SPAN over their own benefit, right? So everything's done for SPAN's benefit. Okay, that's fine, but what does that mean? Well, it means that there are some certain behaviors that you can expect to see that person. If they are acting according to this, we expect them to start seeing these elements happening. We observe. So in your job and at your job, you should know and follow the code of ethics. You should be honest and open in dealing with others, right? That if something goes wrong, you don't hide it. You inform your superior. That if dishonesty or unethical behavior, if you observe it yourself, you have an obligation to report it. And if there's a potential conflict of interest, you discuss it. there's an openness in talking about honesty. Also, there are certain behaviors that really don't match this. For example, if you take credit for the work that somebody else has done, oh, I'm brilliant, I've done this, when actually it has nothing to do with that. Right? That's not being honest. Gossip. We had a long talk about gossip. I understand gossip exists everywhere, and that's okay. But gossip is not helpful. It's usually not an honest activity, because basically gossip is spreading fake news, right? False news, unreported, etc. So we have to somehow control gossip too. The other one is using companies' resources for your own benefit. Prioritize your own interests over the company's interests, and then accept bribes and gifts from others. There are already rules and regulations in place that you should not, right? This is already, this is a given. So we already have that in the code of ethics. Yeah, but is it really activated? Is it really acted on? And it has to be observed, right? It has to be observed. And it's not that we're all spying on each other. That's not what this is about. This is about, we basically act in a certain way that everyone, there's an openness about this, a transparency about it. Particularly with regard to hiding issues. Or, it's their rice bowl, we don't touch their rice bowl. If their rice bowl is actually hurting us, hurting the organization, then you have to do something about it. You have to basically be able to step forward. And hopefully you don't have an enormous problem, because if you do, then there's other elements that have to happen, such as a review committee and a different way of organizing information flow, etc. But we haven't come to that point yet. We don't need anonymous boxes and things like this at this point. It might happen in the future, but for the moment, we're just going with our observed behavior, our honesty with each other. The next one is discipline. This is the expected behavior, is that SPAN non-executives understand and apply SPAN regulation policies and procedures. Again, you're a regulator, so therefore you are bound by legal documents, bound by legal obligations to act. Right. So therefore, the first thing in terms of expected behavior is that you know the rules and regulations and procedures. That within your own span of control, or within your own area, that you actually obey and abide by those rules. That you act in accordance with them. And that if you are in doubt, if you don't know if this is right or wrong, you go and you ask. You don't just make up your mind, or you don't ignore. You actually go around. And on the contrary, if you don't, then what are the inappropriate behaviors? It's basically that you go around or you ignore the regulations, that you remain silent when others disrespect them, right? And that you make assumptions. Assumptions are usually not a good idea. Check, check, check. Everything is written down, so you should be able, through your boss, through your colleagues, even through your own knowledge, to be able to figure out and be disciplined. Any questions so far on these first two? They're pretty evident, right? There's nothing too confusing about them.
Sir, these behavioral elements, is it the same with these executive?
Yeah. Yeah, I can show, if you want, I can show you the executive. In honesty, it's a big one in here is show favoritism. That basically somebody is being favored over someone else for only emotional reasons versus work related. So that's an addition. They have an additional behavior that would be inappropriate. But they also have gossip. They also have credit, paying credit for others, the work of others, etc. So your bosses are equal in terms of how they're being viewed. And if you have a problem with it, you can go to them and talk to them. If that doesn't go anywhere, then you have HR. HR is a different function now. It's no longer this little office in the corner where not a lot happens, not a lot goes on. Well, actually, HR has a function now because we have these priorities. And we've worked with many HR departments. You have good people in HR, right? So it's not the people, it's the processes that we're not helping them, that we're not supporting them. Now we have. If that doesn't work, then we can come back and give them a hard time. Because this is not acceptable. Right? These are key for the organization to be able to do the job that you need to do. You have a very important job to do. It's fair. And the last one of these expected behaviors that are accountable, which is basically take the responsibility for your work and deliver high quality, timely, and cost-effective results. Essentially, do your job on time, do it to the quality level that's expected. You have a job description, you have basically an evaluation, do your, don't be idle. So basically, what do we expect? We expect you to be conscientious, care about the quality of the work that you do, that you respect timelines and schedules, that you're decisive, you take the decisions and actions that are in line with your responsibility. So you have a job, you have a job description, you have certain things you are expected to do, just do it. Do it in the quality, in the time, in the resources that you have. You know, some of the inappropriate behaviors is you don't do things on time. If you don't do things on time, then KPIs don't get done. KPIs don't get done, and the department doesn't do its task. The department doesn't do it, the division, and everything goes down. And then some people work and other people don't work, right? So the people who do all the work, it's like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna work anymore. So then the whole atmosphere, the whole culture starts coming down. So discipline is very important, or accountable is very important in terms of just seeing that the motor goes, that things are being produced, and being produced to the quality and in the timeliness that's required. So also, problems will happen. Stuff happens, right? So you can't get a job done, that's okay. Tell your boss ahead of time. Don't tell them after the fact, or after the fact. Inform. Be honest and open. Things happen all the time. So it's not that things can't happen, things will happen. It's how do you handle it? How do you handle the dilemma? How do you handle the quality issues? That's the key. So the only other thing in here that we're talking about is that, you know, some people tend to make decisions that they think they're entitled to make, that they should make, when in fact it's not their job to do that. Be careful that you actually work within that framework. So talk with your bosses. Make sure that things are the way they are supposed to be. At your level of responsibility, great, accepted, just stay within it. Don't overstep, because that can get a lot of trouble for yourself as well as for everyone else. And then the next one is proactive. As I just said, problems happen. They happen every day. So it's not just going to your boss and saying, I have a problem. It's, I have a problem, but here's a solution. Proactive is you're thinking about what can I do, versus I'm not paid to think. I just show up at work, I do my work, I go home. It's like, no, actually we need you. The only 280 of you, for 33 million people, every single one of your roles is important. Every one of you is important. There's so few of you. So as a consequence, it's this idea of always looking to do something better. It doesn't always work out, but at least you're trying. You're thinking. You need to show up thinking at work. Not just going into your office like a zombie. Zombies don't need to apply and stand. And basically only achieving what is the minimum of what's expected. Remember, SPAN needs to move forward. It needs to go far, much further where it is. You've only achieved 87% of where you need to be. And you need to not only hit 100%, you need to hit 120%. So you have a big gap to cover. Just doing your job, doing the basics, essential, is not enough. What can you do more? How can you do it more? And that's what it is. And then being defensive, being close-minded, not appreciating feedback. Because feedback is important. And feedback is usually negative. It's like, you could be doing something else. But through feedback, you learn. And that's why it's so important. we actually be honest in talking about what works and what doesn't work and why we should be changing. These are important elements. So proactive is key. And you can see this. The difference between someone who's proactive and someone who's not, again, they go to their boss or to their colleague and say, this is the problem. That's not proactive. Identifying the problem is important, but it's the idea of what's the solution. And it might not be the right solution, but at least you've thought of a solution. So that's easy to observe. It's easy to observe. And again, we're not asking you to become geniuses overnight and having these super solutions. What we're saying is that think about what would be a good solution. That because you know your job, you know what's happening, you know your environment, you know better than your bosses, and you certainly know better than the HODs. That's the key difference in what we're seeing today in what we call the Industry 4.0. The Industrial Revolution 4.0, the IoT, etc., that the people who are in the jobs, in the market, at the ground level, know the best. You might not know everything, but you know more than the people above it. That's the big difference. And so therefore, if you know more, you actually have better ideas. You have better ideas than your boss. Is that true? You know better. So it's an issue of how do you convince your boss? That's a different story. But at least you're talking to him in that way, right? You're at least bringing ideas. Bring ideas. That's the idea. Customer driven. This is about anticipate the needs of both. Okay, customers in this role is not only the users of water, it's also your colleagues. It's also other departments. If you don't do your job, then somebody in span is not getting what they need. They're not getting the information. They're not getting the data, they're not getting the help that you need to be given. So we talk about customers in terms of both internal and external. So you need to know what your job is doing for others. And you need to talk to them, figure out, is this right? Am I doing a good job? Not only to your boss, but also to the people around you, at your level. How can I help you better? That is customer driven. That is customer driven. So understand and know who your customers are. That's key. And within the KPIs, one of the big focuses is on who's the customer of this KPI. Who am I serving? And more importantly, who's serving me in order for me to get my KPI done? So it's a supply, who's supplying what in order for me to do this? So this is a big one. Because then you understand how the system starts working, if you understand what your customers' needs are, both internal and external. So the inappropriate behaviors, be unaware of who your customers are and what their needs are. That you put your own interests ahead. This is good for me, not for you, I don't care, right? That's not helpful. That you fail to address poor customer feedback, and that you really don't interact with your customers in a good way. Any questions on this one? Okay, and we have two more. Strategic is basically the non-executives understand and work towards accomplishing the long-term goals. Remember, there are 8 strategies. Within your job, how many of those strategies fit? There's clearly one on customers. There's clearly one on the changes within the industry that could affect you. There's clearly one about learning. And there's a lot about the supply of water and the quality of water in the strategies. So within that, where do you fit? How can your job help achieve those targets? And last but not least, as we talked about earlier, is this idea of studious, this idea of learning, and being interested, curious, and asking questions. Questions are a great way of getting information. They're a great way of understanding customers. They're a great way of understanding the future. So all of these actually fit together, right? They don't stand isolated, they all work together. Proaction means you're thinking. Studious means you're interested in your thinking. Customer orientations means you're basically asking questions. Long-term strategy, Strategic means you're understanding moving forward. Now, this is not 100% of your job, right? You still have your job to do. But within the confines of that job, there's things you can do to move forward. Your bosses are expected to be doing this, and the bosses' bosses are expected to do it. Everyone in the organization. And that's why I say the noise level in your organization changes when people start doing this. As you're talking. You're talking as a customer or to a supplier. You start asking questions. You start interacting with each other. And it's not just about what did you do in the weekend and how lousy Man United is. It's about basically things that are happening within the organization. That's what happens. So within the 7 that we've just seen, what I'd like you to do is just sit back and think about, what you want to do more of. Considering that we have these 7, I'll go back to 7. Where are they? They're right here. These 7. Within these 7, what do you want to do more of? What do you want to change yourself? And what do you want to do less of? Right? So not only I want to do more of something, but also I have to stop doing something. And just for yourself, write them down. I'm not going to ask you. We're not going to film it. We're not going to show it to the camera. This is basically the idea behind it. What can you do of these 7 behaviors that you say, yeah, I'm interested in this one. How can I change? What can I do to that? Because that's the mindset that we'll work with today. Yeah? So I'll give you 5 minutes to just sit back, think about it. If you have any questions, please ask.